experiment in Bolivia. And the new constitution declares that Bolivia is a unitary, plurinational, communitarian, free, independent, sovereign, democratic, socially decentralized state with territorial autonomies that is founded on plurality and political, economic, judicial, cultural, and linguistic pluralism. So you can see the sequence of terms that seem to go on forever and forever, and one wonders about the practicality of such an approach to bring about a new nation-building project. But what is most important for me, and with this I will start heading into the fourth part of the presentation, is that the Constitution seeks to harmonize both what is seen as a communitarian project or proposal and the liberal project of sort of the traditional liberal modernity, and I will spell out that in a moment. But the idea, this idea that building a communitarian state is an important part of what is going on in Bolivia today. And obviously also, as in the case of Venezuela, the new constitution brings about the possibility for a mixed economy that includes not only private property, but also communal property, collective property, cooperatives, etc., etc., etc. So that's what, in my reading, sort of orients itself towards what we could call a post-capitalist form of economy. Okay. Just again a couple of things here. The last two bullet points that we have at the level of education, at the level of many aspects of the legal reform brought about by the Constitution, and even before, a strategy to introduce what is called a decolonizing education, a communitarian education, that is seen as intra and intercultural as well. So it's not just a question of replacing the liberal system by the communitarian system and getting rid of the liberal system, but it's about intra and interculturality. And the idea that in El Alto, and I forgot to mention that El Alto is a city close to La Paz that in about 25 years has grown from being almost nothing to being a city of close to 1 million people, mostly of Aymara origin, and mostly people who have migrated from the countryside over the decades of neoliberalism, spelled out from the countryside by the neoliberal reforms of the 80s and the 90s, and have created this city that, according to some of the Aymara intellectuals, it really is school for a kind of communal thought or communal thinking. Okay, now, what is this thing? And I know, I understand that this is going to be very controversial and very debated, and it is a matter of debate and controversy in Bolivia itself, including among many different positions within the Aymara and Quechua-speaking intellectuals as well, about the communal form of politics, and the question of liberalism and the question of modernity. And the communal, and this comes from a number of sources. This comes from some of these Aymara intellectuals. This comes from people who have been working closely with some of the intellectuals. There's a recent set of books talking about this, and I will be pleased to mention some of those in the question and answer period. But the basic idea is that if you look at the history of Bolivia, if you look at what's happening not only historically, but happening today, even in El Alto, in an urban area, so this is not just about looking at the countryside, this is not just looking at the traditional aylus, this is looking about what kinds of logics have been recomposed and reintroduced in the cities of Bolivia itself, particularly in El Alto. This is very much about El Alto as well, so it's very specific to this, so we have to keep that in mind. That what is happening there is a reconstitution of communitarian logics in a different way from what took place, even what takes place today in the countryside, but that nevertheless with a cultural logic that in which the collective property of resources prevails, even if it is combined with private management and utilization of those resources. So what especially this comes from Felix Patsipaco, one of the most visible indigenous intellectuals who is writing about this, and again very controversially so, that he looks at the economic and political system on the one hand is completely different from the liberal system. How does he define the liberal system? The liberal system he defines as a system based on private property and representative democracy. So it's a basic definition of the tradition of modern liberalism. He says, in the tradition of modern liberalism, has been with us for all these 100 years. It really has failed, especially has failed us, you know, poor Aymara people, peasants, etc., etc. And it is time that we give a sort of a historical chance to this other conception that he labels the communal system. So there's an idea about the communal system. And one of the things, I mean, you can link the communal system, some people like Colectivo Situaciones in Argentina, Raúl Sivech in Uruguay are linking this idea about the communal system with some concepts from struggles from modern social movements, including, for instance, the Zapatista notions of mandar obedeciendo, to rule by obeying, the fact that leaders are not representatives of the people. Once somebody becomes a representative, it's because he has become disconnected from those who he or she represents, but that leaders really are part of that community, which are elected or sometimes mandated to be representatives, but that they come out from this other non-statist, non-state kind of logic, communal logic. So then there is a very different, the Zapatista notion, of course, of a world where many worlds can fit, where many worlds can exist, but also has been incorporated into some of these visions about pluralism and pluriversality by social movements in many different countries. And so the question then of modernity becomes, for me, a key problematic in what is happening in South America today. And this is the last part of the presentation. I hope you're still with me. And okay, good. Okay, modernity. Why is it the key problematic of what is happening here? And of course, it's one particular way of seeing it, and it's a conjunctional way of seeing it. And I'm drawing a lot on a collective project especially with Larry Grossberg and John Pickles at UNC Chapel Hill, but with many other colleagues as well, especially Marisol de la Cadena and Mario Glaser in the US and Canada. And looking at, well, if we look at the different positions of modernity today, we can say that there are three main positions. The first position is modernity as a universal. Okay? That seems to be the dominant position. I don't have it here spelled out in the PowerPoint, but it would be in the paper. The position upheld by people like Anthony Giddens, Jürgen Habermas, Alain Touraine, Alberto Berlucci, well, almost everybody, Michael Hart, Antoni Negri, everybody. We live within a world that has been very much shaped by a Euro-modernity, a particular kind of Euro-modernity, because even within Europe, there are many kinds of modernities. Okay, that's the first position, modernity as a universal, and globalization as the universalization of that kind of modernity. Second position, there are alternative modernities. I mean, if you look at what's going on worldwide, what you see is that people, different groups, different countries, different nations, different movements negotiate modernity. And in negotiating modernity, they create their own kind of modernity. They create their local modernities, mutant modernities, alternative modernities. So the second thesis, which is very ethnographic in its source of research, is that idea that there are many alternative modernities. We are in a world of alternative modernities. There is not anymore a single modernity that we can point at and say, okay, this is it. Third position, and this has been mostly articulated by Larry, and I'm glad that Larry is here, he can answer the questions about this position, is that modernity was always plural from the start, that modernity has no single origin and no single trajectory, and in that way we can really radically de-essentialize and multiply modernity, learn to see modernity as a multiplicity, learn to see that not every modernity then is Euro-modernity, and that there are multiple modernities, and that we can reclaim the project of multiple modernities as a legitimate and useful and interesting ontological and political project. The key struggle here then is the struggle within modernity, I mean, between different kinds of modernity. And there was a lot, I mean, Larry has a wonderful paper that is just about this hypothesis, and everybody can have access to this, I assume. There's a fourth possibility, which I'm going to explain